actually placed him in the position that he belongs in and put things of monetary value or even just things in general in their proper place, which would be underneath our livelihood. It's not, it doesn't make us. So, and that's what we have to understand. And I know we had this debate going on at least, I want to say about 2 years. I understood the concept of printing the money because then it would allow everyone to have. I understood that basic concept, but in giving everyone something to have, then how would we go about our course of our daily economic life?
Mm-hmm.
Not, I understand that it
How
has
would
a
we
value.
function
How
without,
would
right.
how would we function without it? Do we go back to the whole bartering system where, okay, well, you had 10 apples and I have 10 oranges and we trade off? How do you substantiate the economic base in which the world is built upon? That was my whole concept to it. I understood the whole principle, and I understand that I understand the whole meaning behind that everyone should have and no one should go lacking. Because we often talked about if people own farms and if they grew a crop of corn, why not be able to, make profit or however sustain your family and your livelihood off of that portion, but in another portion have a portion set aside for those who are in need. And
It's touchy. Certain aspects are very, very touchy because even the element of when we take what our Father has created and we try to attach a value to it. Do you understand what I'm
Right.
saying? And then we associate that value, we factor into that value our profitability. That's really a difficult area to be in.
right.
You see, because how much are you leaning on greed then? How much are you fostering?
Well, I was going to say
You
that
know?
it also goes to how much an individual feels that they have to possess. Do you understand? How many things do you have to possess? Can your life be rich enough, filled with just God and His Word and doing what He wants you to do without all of the physical trappings that man has made? The computers, the MP3 players, the TVs,
Man,
the
what would I do without my
cable.
computer?
What
That's
would we
what
do with all of those things? And I think we've grown so accustomed to them that we've also placed them over him as well. So
Oh,
I mean,
that's true. That's a possibility.
we have to
Sure.
look at all of those things and saying, as we spoke about before, he's a good loving God, but He can only take so much of not being loved.
Well,
You
naturally.
understand?
Naturally.
So
It has to
you
be
have to look
returned.
at that whole perspective of how He feels, and then place yourself in His shoes and say,
He doesn't
well,
wear shoes.
I mean, you guys know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Put yourself in His place to understand. Try and have some understanding of how you might feel if someone constantly took from you and not acknowledged you in that you gave it to them. That would, I mean, I think we actually
Yeah.
had an analogy for that a long time, about 8 years ago, and we were talking about two cups, where one person would constantly pour into a cup and the other person wouldn't pour back into a cup. And so at some point that cup that was being poured out of became empty. And I mean, and it just started to run dry. And so you have to look at, okay, and how does it get another fill? Do you understand? So you have to look at it from that particular standpoint.
It's really it's really a big issue, and we can identify with this. If I give you something, if I entrust something to you, and I ask you to do right by what I've given you, and you immediately seek how can you profit from it,
Right.
then if I found that information out, I would be offended because the kindness that I showed you, you didn't multiply, you didn't
Right.
continue its expression.
Not the money, but the kindness.
Right.
Right. The love,
Right.
the
Right.
what the
giving
meaning
portion that's behind
part.
it,
Right.
So these things that we are contending with now, that many are contending with. I know if you're someone that's struggling with hardship because of it, and you read throughout the scriptures that some men have come up during those times. Jacob, he entered into a land that eventually suffered from famine.
Mm-hmm.
And he eventually had to send to Egypt to get something to eat. And it was the land itself that was being stricken.
Mm-hmm.
But because he was an element there, because he existed
Right.
there, he suffered from it.
Right.
So it's who was another one? Elijah, I believe it was. When the woman was told, when the Lord told Elijah, go to the woman, and I've told her to feed you.
Right.
And he went there to her, and she said, look, man, I don't have nothing.
Right.
I got this one little cup that you see
right.
left, and I figure me and my son are going to eat this, and we're just going to die
Right.
behind it. But see, Elijah, his attitude was, look, you have to understand, and he didn't openly express this right out to her, but you have to understand that it's God who has sent me here.
Right.
And he has told me that you were given the command by him to feed me. So I'm going to make sure you fulfill that portion. So Elijah's attitude became, just make me a small cake of bread. So that aspect of righteousness can be fulfilled.
Right. Well, faith.
You see?
That faith.
Well, it was sure. It was going to be an
faith,
expression of it.
Right.
On her behalf.
Right.
That was on her behalf.
Right.
He made his purpose to make sure these things were accomplished. Right. You see, so whatever the Father might have had in mind to do for her, he would do it for her.
Right.
You see, as long as she fulfilled, like you said, that faith that was given her. So, but again, she was in a place that they suffered because of what the land itself was stricken with. And I mean, I was asking an individual the other day about, I remember as a child that on Sundays the stores weren't open. Mm-hmm. All stores were closed. You couldn't go anywhere. And take it back even farther, because I was just coming up during that time. So I noticed that that began to kind of to change a little bit. There might be a place down the street here that might be open, or 2 blocks away that might be open. Well, I asked someone that had been around longer than me what might have introduced that concept. What was that concept based off? Because I wanted to know if it was spiritually inspired, if it was based off of men who had a belief to say, well, this day we need to dedicate toward God, and we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be. And what I got back from him was that was the case. Well, if that was the case, why did we ever move away from it?
Well, I think you mentioned someone said that the malls started staying
the malls
open.
The malls, and then the smaller stores found out that the malls were profiting on Sundays, and they decided to open up their doors as well. Well, I've learned that there are within the elements of righteousness, there are still certain requirements. Mm-hmm. Christ said, I didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill them. And salvation is just one part of what must happen here among us. It must become about righteousness to us as well. And the concept of keeping the Sabbath holy, whatever day you may choose with the Lord to be that day, that's between you and Him. But this nation that we live in has expressed it to be on Sundays, and that's generally when the churches are filled. That's generally when the word goes out. That the message is delivered, the people gather together. So that's a day that's been pretty firmly established, and it's important for us on those days to really try to do what's good, to keep it holy, and I have negated that in the past, and I'll tell you something. And I believe Gigi can testify to this. I have found that there is still a significant importance there. I have used grace to kind of get past that, to say that it's okay, But the Father has come along to me, and the Lord has stood by his side, and the Father said, no, this is mine. Right here, this is mine. And he has requested of me to uphold certain aspects of it. And I have found that since I have been doing that, some of the things that I have suffered spiritually